Growing carp is really easy. Well, it is on the surface, but you're about to see the harvest of my biggest carp and the impact that the driest year on record has had on my yields. In the last video you would have seen us rescuing those first year carp from the parent fish, and today we are harvesting the whole pond to drain the pond dry and lime it, and remove all the juvenile carp and all the parent fish so that we can drain the pond completely dry tomorrow with pumps before liming it. Then we'll grade out the small fish and grade the fish we want to breed from, the brood fish, which will be selected to keep for future spawning next year, and we're adding a few to the mix as well. So we've got the... Before anyone makes judgment, this hat was free. I do not take my top off for star jumps. The tank's set up behind us with air lines, ready to bring the fish up now and start sorting them out. First day of harvesting, I only drain a small amount of water to enable us to catch the bulk of the fish so that there's less to pick out of the mud the following day once completely drained. Because if you leave too many in the pond once it's completely drained, the fish are left wallowing in silty puddles where leech can jump onto the fish quite easily, and if left overnight in these ponds you end up harvesting fish that are plastered in leech. And although they come off in the holding tanks quite easily, it's just added stress that I don't want to put on the fish. After a summer of growing and looking fantastic in the winter, you don't want their condition to deteriorate at harvest. There's a lot of obviously sexually mature fish, so they're C4s, C5s. So they're going to be sort of mid to upper double, and I'm expecting 60 that we put in as brood fish. So there's quite a lot of big powerful fish that if we've got a shallow net, then getting the leads underneath them, you've not got much room for error. So the shallow mesh net is 3 meters deep, this one's 6 meters. Slightly bigger mesh on the deeper net, but it will just mean that I've got a little bit more room for error to sneak the leads underneath the fish without, if you've only got 3 meters between lead line and float line, you've not got as much of a bag. So I'll have twice as much bag in the deeper net. There's 100 meter, 6 meter deep, and 14 mil mesh on this one. So that's the one we're going to be using today. Going to shoot it up into the shallows, around into the deeps, and we'll land it into the deep end. We've got the overflow pipe, which I turned over slightly last night to sort of crowd the fish to where we want them, take them out of the shallows a little bit, get them into some deeper water where the lead line can work a bit better. And so we're going to sweep this around now and see how we go. You might have seen our video in the summer about the pond which had a leak in the dam wall. So that was kind of adding to the stress on the lack of water that we had coming through the valley. And this was in the broodfish pond that it happened. You might have seen that video. If you haven't, go and have a look at that video, because that was quite a worrying time, particularly not knowing what the rest of the summer was to have in store for us. So that was in June. So we had a lot of summer ahead of us, and with the pond leaking and the land drains already dry at that point, it was quite worrying about what the rest of the summer would have in store for us. Now we've got to go around the dam wall. If I was to literally take an end and walk across, you can imagine the lead's 6 meter deep net, so the leads are 6 meters back behind this first float. So if I was to cut across there now, the leads would cut out this corner. This is a really deep corner, so what we'd always do is pull plenty of slack here to get plenty of lead up into this hole so it fishes right through to dam the deep water. Like I say, I could literally walk this, a lot of people do, just walk an end round, and it's the first few leads, the first few meters of lead is
effectively not really fishing because there's no weight either side of those first few leads. Whereas at the back of the net, that you've got, say if you've got 25 metres of lead before the middle 50 metres of lead, that middle 50 metres of lead is going to be fishing very, very effectively, and the wings don't really fish very well, so you've always got to pull the wings into the holes, try and move the fish out into the bag where the net fishes more efficiently.
The bottom line of a fish farm business is on the progression of their fish. So why don't we look at what they're doing to highlight what the fisheries that aren't seeing that progression, what they're not doing. A fish farmer, what do they have? They have ponds that they need to grow carp in and harvest at the end of the year. So those ponds are designed to be drainable so they can harvest 100% of the stock, empty the pond, sell the fish, restock, lime the ponds, get it ready for another growing cycle, lime the pond, and then they're introducing a calculated biomass back into that pond which they know is going to perform at an optimum, so at the end of the next growing cycle they have a fantastic crop of big carp that have converted the diet efficiently, and that's how they create a business out of growing carp. So when it comes to fisheries, how many of us are looking at that? How many of us are really screwing down on the biomass, the numbers, and understanding the ponds? Because that's something that I spend probably 90% of the focus every year from my own fish farming. I look at what I put in that pond last year, the weight, the biomass that I started with, and the yield at the end of the year. So some ponds perform much better at perhaps £300 per acre, and other ponds almost double that. So understanding that and keeping good records is how I get the best out of my ponds every summer and keep that cost efficiency at an optimum when you're feeding fish. Obviously, if you've got an overstocked pond, you need to feed them a lot of food, but they're not necessarily converting it very well because they're overstocked. So you're feeding a lot, it's costing you a lot of money, they're not converting it very well. And in the middle of that, you've also got water quality and oxygen that's a little bit dicey, a little bit on edge all summer. On the other hand, you can understock a pond at the start of the year. Weed can get up, create behaviours in your fish which aren't productive in their progression. You want to keep fish active and moving and feeding. If it's very weedy, they just want to sit and bask in the weed. Underneath the weed is very dark and cold. Above the weed is very warm and oxygen rich. So it creates an environment which isn't productive and fruitful for growing carp. So there's kind of a balance in the middle that we need to strike perfectly to get the ponds performing at an optimum. However, bringing this back to the summer that we've just had, if the ponds are 70% capacity on their water level, then essentially I should be stocking 70% of that calculated biomass if I'd have known, but obviously it's impossible to know the sort of summer we're going to have.
These are good signs when it's digging in the silt like that. That's how it should look. The lead line unwrapped and full of silt. They can't get out of that. Using my left foot to drag the leads along the top of the silt, hopefully underneath the fish. It's the sort of shape we want to see out there as well. It's all good, no excuses, Ben. Right, you can slow down now. Let's do a bit the other side, that's good. If it comes in too easy, it's a bit worrying. Let's see with the shape of that, we've got a bit of a bowl out towards the left hand side. So we need to now work this left hand side in a little bit to bring it back into shape. Keep doing a bit each side like that. That's how we do it with just 2 people. A lot of people have bloody 5,000 for this sort of job.
Taking time to slowly tease the net in allows the leads to work and fish far more effectively than if we were to heave this in as fast as possible. If we were to rush, the fish press the panic button and they're more likely to challenge the net and get out. These light and supple lead core lead lines work very well, but they do need to be carefully worked under the fish, so it's important to keep the net organised and stay in contact with where the leads are.
Right, you can slow down and get a little bit more, that's it. So I've basically got to pull faster than you now to get in front of you. See it fizzing out that way, that's where the leads are. Right, let's do a bit the other side because I can't move that now.
And with experience, the floats do actually tell you how the net is shaping up, and you can often gauge where the fish are and which side needs working more than the other.
This is always the point where everyone goes, oh, I ain't caught much. There's not a lot of movement out there. So I just think we would have lost them if we used that shallow net. And a lot of people would say that there's not a lot in here at the minute because there's not a lot moving, but I think we've got them. That's it, you can do the same again that side, just sort of slowly bring it down towards me. I'm nearly in, I've not quite got the leads in yet. Well, this wasn't easy. Just hope there's some carp down there. Hopefully there's a few at the back there. There we go. See, you wouldn't have thought we caught anything, would you, 5 minutes ago? Sat quietly. I'll just jump on that one, we'll just try and tidy this. So they're all crowded nicely together. I don't think they're all there, but as a start,
all of these first year carp coming up in the wings of the net are proof of a fully rounded ecosystem supporting this volume of first year carp. In my last video you would have seen that we cropped around 1,000 of these in fear of the cormorants arriving for the winter and leaving me without any to grow on.
Right, let's get some bins then.
However, it's not just the pond that's responsible for such a good crop of first year carp this year. I felt like that kind of summer was the perfect one for those carp. They had it great when they hatched. They had a nice warm summer as the summer went on. It was nice and warm and the pond stayed shallow, which is great for those first year carp. First year carp tend to do much better when the water is very turbid and almost overpopulated. They seem to just thrive that much better when it's probably the suspended solids in the water when you have that many fish, and that turnover and agitation of the substrate making all those nutrients suspended in the water and releasing the nutrients from the soil is really good for those first year carp. Less so as fish grow and mature, they prefer a little bit more space and a little bit more of a settled environment, but certainly for first year carp it was perfect. With the leads all in and the fish tightly crowded, I was able to then get in and start removing the fish from the net into the holding bins and then into the transport tank, ready to go back for grading. Fish farming is quite unique in the livestock industry in that we can't see our animals until we harvest them. So catching these fish and observing their condition after the long, dry summer of 2025, it was such a huge sigh of relief. I was slightly concerned whether or not they might be lean or carrying more lice than usual with the overcrowding stress caused by the low water levels. Despite the driest summer on record and the disaster of the leak in the dam wall in June, I was made up with how these fish looked. It was so reassuring to see them coming out the other side looking like this, particularly when they've only been fed on our pellets.
We found this little one in the net, not looking too happy with itself, sort of on his side.
And if you remember the last video, we were coming down here to save the fish from the cormorants. Cormorants had turned up for the winter, and this one would have been a first year carp that last winter we didn't get out. We didn't drain this dry and lime it, we just harvested the first year carp off of them and moved on, flooded the pond again, and so this would have been one that we missed last year. So this is now a C2. It would have otherwise been a healthy fish until the cormorant had a go. Look, see those straight lines, all very uniform, that's from a cormorant, and you can see the secondary sort of impact of cormorants. This is a perfect example of secondary. The amount of lice on this fish. So this fish has been obviously stressing a lot after being attacked by a cormorant. Got a bit of flesh hanging off of him there, and you can tell he's losing condition. So the best thing we can do is get this fish back into a holding tank, salt bath. So you'd put about probably 5 kilos in, 1,000 litres, and I'd leave it in there and see if it comes around. That'll certainly knock the lice off, and if it starts to look a little bit more enthusiastic, then it'll go back out as a C2. But if that is a pretty sorry state, that'll probably die, knowing that the amount of stress that fish is under already from the cormorant damage. Then you add that, the amount of lice that have taken advantage of this stressed fish, that fish would probably die without a bit of help. So we'll get that one back, salt bath in, and put him back out. When you stock a fish out, you need to be improving its environment. That's a really good rule. If you're buying fish, you want to give it a better environment than where it's come from. If you're not, then you can't expect that fish to keep growing at the rate that perhaps it has. That's really important, and I think often fisheries get carried away with thinking they want a really big fish which is packed full of muscle and fat, when actually that probably tells you that that fish has had it so good back on the farm. How are you going to better that environment when it goes into your fishery, when you're adding capture, when you're taking away food that's put on a plate for it every day that it would have had on the farm? It's not getting that in the fishery, and it's got added stresses. The water chemistry is going to be different. So I always think that fish that have had it harder where they've been produced always do so much better when they go out, because the environment's improved, the stress is reduced, and they just transition that much better. And I think they're actually wired better because they're used to competing more and they've had it a little bit harder. And another element to that as well is the parasites that they might encounter. I feel like you can farm fish in too much of a sterile environment. If they're not exposed to levels of parasites, external parasites that they're going to be exposed to when they go out into a fishery, that also adds an element of friction when they transition in the spring, when suddenly there's bacteria, virus and parasites that they're going to be exposed to. They can almost be too clean from where they're farmed. So I think although fisheries have in their mind what they want to be buying, clean, big, fat fish, packed full of muscle and fat, is that really what you want? Because I don't think it is. I think quite the opposite. You want a fish that's come from an environment that's quite difficult, quite challenging, and then being put into its forever home where it has an improvement, an improved environment and less stress. They just transition that much better, especially when they're very young. They just do so much better in the long term. Probably a maybe. Nice fish, but he's not very big. bastard, he's fucked his dorsal. Nice overslung mouth though. So I expect you like that, don't you? Feels heavy. Come on. I think I've got to keep that in the roof of the pond. It's too pretty. Yeah, he's big, isn't it? Yeah, it would do. He's 17 pound, I reckon. 18. I might have that one, a picture of that in my hand when I stocked it out. So if it's that one, it's grown quite well. Nice fish that. It's got a shoulder on it and everything. Another really crucial element that fisheries need to understand is where fish have come from when you're buying carp from a fish farm. They've never been caught before. They've never had that element of pressure, angling pressure, essentially predation. People walking around the banks of their home trying to catch them, that's essentially predation. They haven't had that on the farm, so when they go out into your fisheries, you need to understand that pressure, angling pressure, has a negative impact on the progression of your fish. Obviously, when I say it like that, it's obvious. I'll tell you a story about a friend of mine he stocked his lake with fish, young fish, fed them for a couple of years, and they grew like you wouldn't believe. They grew faster in his fishery than what they were growing on the fish farm. They were stocked at the right density, nice young fish that are just cormorant proof, and they grew up to 20 pound. I think they just started to touch 30 pound, and he opened the fishery. When he opened the fishery, the fish just flatlined. They've just stopped growing. The only thing that changed was angling pressure. It's not just capture either that affects fish and impacts the stress and their behaviours. It's being chased around, footfall along the banks around them. And this is kind of a fishery which is quite a basic design, a rectangular fishery, where anglers can access them wherever they go. So it's almost like they can't escape this pressure. I never thought that angling pressure would influence the progression of stock like they have done there. So that is a real eye-opener for me, and a story which I think fishery should really take into account. If you want your fish and you're serious about getting your fish to their full potential, understand that angling is going to get in the way of that. When I first landed the net, it didn't look like I'd caught all 60 fish that I put in this pond. But once we had a couple of loads of fish hauled back to the holding tanks, I had another crowd up in the net, which revealed that there was still plenty left in this deeper mesh net. All of these parent fish needed to be moved before we could start on the offspring. Fish are transported back to be sorted, where I'm having a good look at each one in search of characteristics that I'd like to breed from, generally picking fish based on their size, shape and scale pattern to put back into that pond to produce next year's offspring.
Probably the average size of those fish, which are now C5s, and you'd hope that they'd weigh upper doubles, C5s. Hey. And that's £16.
I don't use hatchery facilities to produce my carp. I allow them to spawn naturally outdoors, which has its own positives and negatives. I can't control when the fish spawn or which female spawns with which male like you can in a hatchery. However, allowing a pool of 40 to 50 parent brood fish to spawn naturally does give a much more diverse mix than if I was to have all my eggs in the basket of just a handful of donor fish.
My original blood in them anyway. It's a long fish. Nice coloration in those original fish. They have a nice overslung mouth as well, which is becoming a bit more of a rarity. We'll keep that one for another year. Breed for them. Nice rounded back on it. Lovely carp. Keep that one for breeding for sure. It's a nice chunky fish. Lovely, yeah. A very big common, so he's going to stay. Add a bit of common blood to the broodfish pond. Perfectly proportioned, great neck. Lovely. Welcome.
Naturally spawning outdoors makes it much more complex and difficult for the gene pool to get too close, because the eggs of one female can be fertilised by half a dozen males, producing a more random and more diverse crop of fry than artificially fertilising eggs indoors. When naturally spawning carp outdoors, on paper you should have at least 2 males to 1 female, and generally younger fish produce more fertile eggs, so you get a higher rate of natural succession than you would with more mature fish. So I'm always looking to add and subtract from this pool of broodfish mix each winter. That's the parent fish out of the way, all up in the holding tanks. Now we're just left with their offspring, which we'll dip net those out. I don't like using the dip net on big fish, obviously, but first year carp, I'm not picking them out by hand, there's thousands in there. So dip net them into bins, up into the transport tank. I'm hoping we can fit them all in one go. So then once these are out there, we're done. The next job is to get the rest of the water off ready for tomorrow. We got all the fish out that we netted today. There's obviously going to be a few left behind. It'll be interesting to see how much of a good job we've done with the net, how many are left tomorrow. Now I've got to pull this pipe off and let it down to, I'll take off another, probably 3 or 4 foot. Just put this pen around the pipe just to keep any fish from going down the pipe and keep them out of the way of it really. So let's try and get it off. Hopefully it's not too much trouble. Hey, whoa. lesson that I've learned over the years farming carp is that carp that hatch in a pond, if they're left in the pond that they're hatched in, they do so much better than if you move them. If we had split them, so we put half of them back in the pond where they were hatched and half moved out into the other first year pond under a predator net, the fish that were introduced back into the home that they were hatched in, there'll be a bigger C2 batch than the fish that you've moved into their brand new home where there's no fish and a predator net across them. I think that is down to the early development of the fry. The whole biology of that fish is based around the nutrients that are available to it, and fish have an essential vitamin and mineral and non-essential vitamin and mineral requirement, meaning that the non-essential vitamin and mineral requirement they can create. Their biology can create certain vitamins and minerals and not others. So the ones that are essential need to be provided externally by their diet or their environment. Therefore, if a fish goes from one pond or is born in one pond, hatched in one pond, it's used to creating certain vitamins and minerals that it's deficient in that water. That water might be providing a lot of X, not enough of Y. So that fish will have to balance its biology to make up where it's deficient. Whereas when you move that fish, suddenly they might have a lot of Y and not enough X. So their biology then has to readjust and reconfigure to where they're deficient in that environment. That might take some time. Whereas if they haven't had to readjust and they stay in the home that they've hatched in forever, they've never had to readjust or reconfigure their whole biology. And that's a huge part. I think that is why younger fish do so much better when you stock younger fish than when you stock older fish. Because if you're stocking a fish which was perhaps 8 years old, grown on a fish farm, 8 years that fish has spent being used to that water chemistry, having deficiency in areas and surplus of nutrients in other areas. And then suddenly when you put it into an environment where it has to reconfigure after 8 years of having it one way and suddenly changing, and we see that in the real world, that older fish that are stocked, if you stock older fish, they take longer to settle in, longer to get growing. They take almost a year, 2, maybe even 3 years to adjust and start progressing again. Some of you will know that I have a fishery management podcast called the Fishery FastLane. In episode 2, I have Rich Seeds on the podcast, and he spoke about stocking C3, C4 and C5 year classes into his syndicate, and the pattern that he recognised with the biggest carp and the age of them at stocking.
You said you staggered your stocking. Yeah, we staggered the stocking and the sizes to an extent. We didn't put masses of 20s in. I think in total we put about 25 20s in, and there's probably about 325 fish in there. Right. A lot of it was due to obviously cost and like the value. Like it's the way they were growing so quick. It made sense to buy cheaper, smaller fish because they're growing so quick. The C3, that we put in, sort of 7-pounders that we didn't photograph, just all of a sudden have flown through. And you can sort of track them going past the 20-pounders that we put in. They were in at roughly the same time, probably a year maybe gap. But some of the 20-pounders haven't gone anywhere near the size of the C3 that had gone in. Right. And that's now one of our biggest fish at like 53 pounds or something like that.
Went in at C3.
Yeah, and so he's flown on through. To do with the water they're going into and just pot luck.
Yeah.
I think like you look at that Manor Fisheries, it's about 5 minutes from me in Timsbury in Romsey, and it's got that massive 60-pound fully scaled.
Yeah.
And I think that went in at, I think they said about £2 or something like that.
Yeah.
So it'd be hard to believe that you could tell that £2 that's going to be an absolute monster.
Yeah. Morning. I set the alarm for 5 a.m. to come and start the pump, so that when people arrive, we've got some helpers coming today. So I don't want them standing around all morning with nothing to do. So if I start the pump now, when they arrive, hopefully we can get straight to work and get the last few fish out. But so it's 5 a.m. It's a real hard frost actually. And just tried to get in, and the padlock is frozen. It's frozen solid. I can't move the numbers. Very cold night, so I've got to try and get in before I can do anything. Got the only anchor in. As I attempt to pull the pull cord on the pump, I realise that the hard frost has frozen the mechanism solid. I just can't get it to start. After a little bit of cursing, eventually it gives and it pulls and it starts. Thank God for that. It's really important to me to be able to drain my ponds entirely. If I don't, then the small carp, the first year carp from sexually mature batches of fish, so 4-year-old carp or older, if I'm missing them, if they're in pools at the end of the year, or if you haven't netted them all, which you don't, they're tiny carp which quite easily get out of the net, or you'll miss them as you're sweeping the pond. If we don't catch all of them, then they are going to be next year's C2 carp. A C2 carp can reach 2 or 3 pound in the right environment, especially if it's now given all that space. So if you miss 100 of them, you could have 200 pound of carp in that pond that you haven't accounted for in your feed ration. Any man-made fishery, in my opinion, should be drainable.
Once the sun came up on day 2, I waited for help to arrive, allowing the pump a few hours to reduce the remaining pool of water, so that we could get straight to work when the helpers arrived. As the pool shrank in size, it revealed what we had missed with the net the previous day. We had caught every single carp in yesterday's sweep, or was it the cold which had helped to numb the carp into a docile state that they often slip into when extreme temperatures set in? We've observed carp under the ice completely motionless, which really makes me question fishing for carp in the extreme cold. But that is ultimately why we do this in the winter. Conditions when temperatures are colder are far less harmful to fish, and their environment is much more settled. They are more numb to handling, with very little influence on stress, so don't take inspiration from how I've handled fish in this video. It's entirely down to temperature. I must put emphasis on that point. Carp stress and tolerance to handling is amplified with every single degree of temperature rise. To get the pond as dry as possible, I rock the pipe into the silt, which creates a bowl in the silt that the water naturally runs towards, exposing the final tiny first year carp for us to pick out.
So if you've seen any fish farming content or drained any ponds before, especially in clay ponds, you find these craters along this bank. There's half a dozen of these clay craters which are dug out by the fish. Essentially when they've got lice, those argillus or external lice that are feeding on the mucus and the skin of the fish and irritating them externally. So to relieve that stress, like a dog having fleas, they want to scratch it. Like us having nits, you'd want to scratch your head. A fish can't scratch itself, so it has to rub up against surfaces to relieve that external stress, and that's what they use clay for. Nice sort of soft abrasive material to relieve that external stress that they're getting from these lice. And along the bank here, wherever there's a nice blue seam, clay seam, they've rubbed up and created these craters. Now the more that sort of curvature is created, the more it's better designed for the carp. So once they start to dig out a little hole like this, it gets bigger and bigger because they know that that curvature of that crater is best shaped for them to scratch up alongside, and you would have seen fish flashing and doing exactly that to rub themselves, and that's because of those external lice.
To complete the drain down, I lightly dust the deep end with hydrated lime because this will be the first area of the pond to flood and potentially support any fry that we've missed. I want to get the broodfish back in this pond as soon as possible, so I don't go crazy with the lime. A hard freeze was due that night anyway, and most organisms can't survive being frozen, so that alone will sterilise the dry substrate. For that reason, I only localised the lime treatment to the deep areas because I don't want to have too much of an influence on the pH of the whole pond once it's full and the fish are restocked. Hydrated lime creates pH extremes which will kill organisms on contact. Note that we use it as a biocide, not as a water treatment, which we see many people get wrong. Calcium carbonate is a much safer mineral product for treating ponds containing live fish for the purpose of pH buffering and helping the organic recycling process. Oh, and by the way, every carp in this video has been farmed on our BP milling pellets. If you've enjoyed this, all I ask is that you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I've been Ben Pinniger and I'll personally be responding to comments if you have any questions. It's you that make the filming and editing of these videos worthwhile, so thank you.